Hello and good afternoon from me, Desmond Lynam. In Sport on 2 today, we feature the third round of the FA Cup and celebrate 30 years of Sports Report. Yes, Out of the Blue, the signature tune for Sports Report, celebrating 30 years today. During the next 4.5 hours, many famous broadcasting names associated with the programme down the years will be joining us. Among them, David Coleman, Brian Moore, John Arlott, Brian Johnston, Harry Carpenter, Eamonn Andrews, Cliff Morgan, and Fred Perry. Brian Clough, named Manager of the Month, has said he'll be with us as well. It's very much business as usual, too, with the FA Cup third round on the spot reports from 16 ties and racing from Sandown Park. And, of course, we'll be reporting on the Test match in Hyderabad, where Jeff Boycott made a century, but the match ended in a draw. Well, good afternoon, David and Brian.
Good afternoon, Desmond. Happy birthday to all of you there.
Thank you very much indeed.
Afternoon, Des. Happy birthday.
Thanks, David. David, it's back to business for you after quite a break. Are you looking forward to it this afternoon?
Well, I'm looking forward to it, but I'm a bit nervous about it. So much has been made of it. I'd hoped to sit back unnoticed, but thanks to the publicity for Sports Report this week, people did notice I was doing a match. And the result is all the press boys have been around. Even the children wish me good luck this morning. Usually they don't know where I'm going. If you believe he's nervous, you'll believe anything.
Well, I was wondering about it, I must say. David, can I ask you how your association with Sports Report began?
Well, I heard some of the very early programs. I was a general news reporter then, a young reporter, and I must say to some extent it fashioned my thinking about news gathering. I was interested in news techniques, and I thought in those early days of Sports Report you showed just how mobile and quick radio can be. It was the first time I'd heard it used properly, quick reports from the grounds, and I thought then, well, perhaps this is the future of news gathering, and I think to a great extent you've proved that since. Especially, too, in recent years when you've spread what you used to do between 5 and 6 throughout the afternoon.
Right. Brian, you used to present the programme, of course. I wonder what outstanding memories that's left you with.
Well, I agree with David. I think it's the mobility which you fellows in radio have, but we haven't got in television. I heard Angus Mackay on the radio this morning, and I think that must be the only time he's ever been on the radio. Bless his heart. And he was talking about radio being bushwhackers. You went in and got stuff. And I remember, you know, such things as MCC might be in West Indies in some out-of-the-way place, and we would ring up the pavilion at half-time, or tea-time rather, and get Colin Cowdery on the line to give us the latest score.
Much to his surprise.
Much to his surprise, but I mean, Angus always used to accept that. I think working on Sports Report, as I did for something like 6 or 7 years, it was without question the greatest apprenticeship that I could have had, and it's an apprenticeship that's everlasting because you're always learning stuff in this business.
Yeah.
One of the problems of being at the other end, of course, Des, when Angus was there, he never seemed to know what time it was in other parts of the world. I've said this before, but he'd come through in the middle of the night. He'd no idea what time it was where you were, with the most extortionate demands. But 6 was the standard he set. You're always pleased to try and get it for him.
We ought to explain, perhaps, to our younger listeners, of course, that Angus Mackay was the man who started it all off back in 1948. Gentlemen,
I think if I may break in, Desmond, he kept it going. In the early 1960s, I remember the powers that be at the BBC decided that Sports Report would be taken from the light programme and put onto the third programme, which was very highbrow and very heavy in those days. And Angus had about 16 years of it then, and I felt that he might well consider that a bit of an insult and let the whole thing slide and die. But he called us all into his office and he said, look, we've been demoted, we've got to make the programme better than it's ever been before, and they'll put us back on the light programme. And within a year, they had. So I think he saved the whole programme well in the early 1960s.
Yes, indeed. Well, he'll be coming in. I don't know whether he'll actually join us on the air later on, because you know what he's like, but he'll be joining us for 1 or 2 drinks later in the evening anyway. Before you go, though, nowadays, both of you, you do a job that half the nation think they'd like to do and could do better, which I think is a nonsense, of course. But I wonder how much you watch or listen to the other. David, do you watch Brian Moore?
Oh, of course. It's regular date Sunday afternoon. Wouldn't miss it. I haven't had much of a chance to watch David in the last year. Absolutely right. Well, you're talking about me not being nervous. I've always believed one of the great ways of relieving tension is going out running, taking some exercise and making yourself sweat. So I go out most days anyway. I'm not a keep fit enthusiast in many ways, but I do like going out training.
Right.
But I was out this morning, and I went a bit harder, really, through tension than I intended to do. Well, I've lost the tension, but now I'm absolutely sorry.
Tired.
Tired, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, how far did you run this morning, then?
Well, I was out about 40 minutes. I reckon about 2 miles. I looked at the shadow on the ground. I seemed to be going quite hard, but the shadow was going up and down. I had 10 minutes on an exercising bicycle. That was a lot more comfortable.
Good Lord, I don't know how you do it, both of you.
Let me just say, I welcome David back. without being schmaltzy, I've always regarded him as a great pro, and he's been doing it a hell of a lot longer than I have, and I've learned an awful lot from listening and watching him, don't worry.
Well, we're all learning from both of you, I can tell you.
Thanks very much, Brian. We'll see each other in Argentina next week, I look forward to it. I'm going out on Tuesday. You're coming the same day?
Yes.
Good. Look forward to seeing you, David.
Okay. They're both going out for the draw. Can we just, before you go, gentlemen, have a quick look at today's third round? David first, where do you think any surprises might come from?
Well, I thought it was a disappointing draw, I've got to say that. Too many matches the wrong way round. The small clubs drawn away from home. But of course, Kip history shows that it's all right anticipating what's going to happen, but humiliation's not very far away. Two matches that I think might be difficult. You've been talking about one. I heard Bobby Moncur and Lou Macaria talking earlier. That's Carlisle Manchester United. United playing as well as they can play. It shouldn't have any trouble, but they are a bit unpredictable at the moment. And there's another match which is interesting. I think West Ham Watford. Watford I've seen twice recently. 8 points out of 8 over the holiday. They may give West Ham trouble, but it's interesting noting, though, that West Ham are coming back a little bit. After not winning a home game till December 10, they won the last 3.
Right, David. Brian, any thoughts that one or two of the non-league sides might do something?
Well, not the non-leaguers, but I tell you what, I don't think the non-leaguers will survive, to be honest, with Duopolo, although Blythe, Spartans and Enfield, obviously one of those two will go into the next hat. But I look for my surprises. I think Wolves will be a little chary about going to Exeter. And I saw Peterborough play over the Christmas period and play well, and I think they might upset Newcastle United.
All right, and if you had to select a team to go to Wembley?
I would say Liverpool as good as anybody, and an outside bet would be Norwich City.
David?
Not really look that far ahead.
Long way, isn't it?
There are a couple of difficult matches here today, and the winners of those two matches could well go on to Wembley. That's Everton, Aston Villa, the two class matches really, and Leeds, Manchester City.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us.
Lovely, my pleasure. Thanks a lot, Dennis.
Thanks, Brian. Brian Moore and David Coleman joining us from grounds around the country this afternoon and going about their business, commentating on a match for you, which you'll see either tonight or tomorrow afternoon. David Coleman and Brian Moore, who started their business on this program. John, can I show you something first of all? If I can just pass that over to you under the microphone there. It's a copy of the Radio Times going back to 1948, January the 3rd, 1948. And there's your name as one of the reporters in the very first sports report. And surprisingly for a lot of people, you were doing soccer commentary that afternoon. Not cricket, but football.
Well, it's the football season.
Yes, but a lot of people didn't know that you did soccer commentary.
Yes, in those days, quite a lot. In fact, a reporter of commentary most weeks. And that, in fact, was I think the first report on the first sports report. They at least had a microphone at Portsmouth, you see. Because in those days, the real problem was getting on the air. They didn't have a microphone at every ground as they do now. If you did a Southampton match, you had to go to the transmitter at Berkeley in the New Forest, where they used to unlock the doors and view you suspiciously and put you down in the shadow of some huge dynamo. At Portsmouth, you had to borrow keys and go into the back of the Guildhall, into an unlit place where you switched on a microphone and hoped that someone at Bristol would say hello. And at Brighton, there was a studio, in of all places, the Pavilion. You were supposed to be able to ask for the key. But in fact, then Miss Waters always had the key in his pocket. And to go up to the chapel and get the key before the match started, he never got on the air. And that was the real problem in those days. And if you were anywhere in London, somehow you had to get to BH. And I can remember driving like a mad thing from Charlton to Broadcasting House, which wasn't funny after a 20-5 finish, getting out with the final score. And for some time after that, you used to get police escort from the Valley if there was a Charlton match. But the real problem was, as I say, just finding a microphone. It was as difficult as that. Because, you know, people don't sort of appreciate it now, but the idea of the 1 minute or 2 minute report was quite unheard of when Angus launched this programme. It was regarded almost as immoral to give a man less than a quarter of an hour to talk about a football league match. The idea of a minute and a half. I mean, Angus thought he was pretty daring with 3 minutes. But it went on, you know, to 2 minutes, minute and a half, minute. People learned to clip down. And it was only a half-hour programme. And what was doing this? There were the two reports.
It started at 5:30 in those days and went on till 6, yes.
And then Peter Wilson on a back report on Joe Louis and Walcott. A bit of a debate. There was one Scottish League match, one a Rugby Union International, and 2 Football League matches.
That's
and
right.
the results, the scores all got in half an hour.
And there was an item called Amateurs in Sport. Alan Hobie, very much with the Sunday Express, of course, arguing in favour of part-time payments to athletes. That subject was with us then, and it's still very much with us. Cliff Morgan, how did you start? How did your connection with Sports Report start? You were a player at the time.
Yes, I was. 1951, and no, 52. Sorry, and Twickenham, England, the Wales of Twickenham, and I was interviewed afterwards by two people, G.V. Wynne-Jones, who was the commentator, and Eamonn Andrews.
Who will be joining us later.
That's right. Yes, and that was the first time I appeared on the programme. It was also the day that another Welshman called Richard Burton tells the story. He couldn't be at the game, but was very much aware of it. And Transistor Radio had just come in at the time, and he was actually in the Old Vic playing Hamlet, and off stage they kept this commentary going, and as Gertrude and Polonius and everyone else came in to greet Hamlet, they put up their hands to say what the score was, whether they were winning or losing. And Burton claims, he said he wasn't at the game, but even now, if you give him a couple of drinks, he'd swear he was at the match. But in actual fact, he was having a cut at Hamlet at the time. And that was an extraordinary day. And my first standing in the studio, because Eamonn stood in front of a big microphone, they were not sitting down like
this.
Standing up. And I remember seeing John Arlott, who I didn't know particularly well, and I saw John I was amazed. He had he had a programme from a football match, and all I could see were 4 words on it. And he sat there with a stopwatch and talked for accurately for that minute and a quarter, and I stood with my mouth open, because I didn't know this sort of expertise existed. And that was your timing. That's what Bob Hope and all these great performers have, is timing, which is the essence of good broadcasting, is timing the right, like Johners and so on, and Carpers.
When did you start? Johners?
I didn't explain that. I didn't buy Johnson for 3 minutes. I'm already saying Island and Arles.
Right. When did you start reporting on the programme, then, Cliff?
My first report on the programme was in 1957, the end of 57.
Yeah. I'm sure that Angus Mackay, who's the man who started it all and will be joining us later on, taught you 1 or 2 tricks as well.
I think actually he must have been well read in the Welsh poets, because his first thing to me was, "I'll expect your son," he said, "to be articulate, lyrical, mercurial, and for certain a bit wild." And
he'll create merry hell when he comes in.
That's what he got, of course, from me.
Right. Harry Carpenter, you started reporting on Sports Report not that far back, did you, or was it round about that same time?
I wasn't one of the very early people, certainly not 48. I can date exactly when I first met Angus Mackay. It was 1950, winter months, and I worked then for a newspaper called The Sporting Record, which used to do with the thing called the Sportsman of the Year. They were the people who started it. It's now the Daily Express, who in fact bought the thing off the Sporting Record. Now I think in 1950 it was probably Bruce Woodcock who was the Sportsman of the Year, and just as the same occasion today goes to the Savoy Hotel, so it did in those days. And there we were at the Savoy Hotel to celebrate the Sportsman of the Year, and Angus Mackay was there, in some state. As far as I don't mean in a bad state, I mean in a regal state. He was sitting in a corner of the room surrounded by acolytes, and I was ushered into the presence. I'd never met Angus Mackay before, and we had a short chat, and he said, "I think I'd like you to do something for Sports Report." And I said, "Well, I've nothing I'd like better." And I remember going home that night and saying to my wife, "I think I've cracked it. I'm going to be in Sports Report." And I never heard another thing for 2 years.
We often went a couple of years without talking to you, did Angus, from time to time. But what about the boxing aspect of it, Harry? Did you do boxing for radio in those years?
Yes, I did. I did my first boxing commentaries for television. But not long after that, I started to do a bit on radio. And in fact, I used to work with Raymond Glendenning for a time, doing what Barrington Gilby, of course, did for many, many years, and far better than I did it. I was the inter-round summariser with Raymond, and we used to go to the smaller events up and down the country, some professional, some amateur, and I used to work with Raymond in those days on radio, and very interesting was. He always used to have dear Raymond, he's gone now, great commentator, but he did try to make everything exciting, which was the technique, of course, in those days. And I did pluck up courage once to say to him, "Look, Raymond, you make life a bit difficult for the inter-round summariser, because people have just been hearing you explain what a tremendous 3 minutes that was, and it might well have been a little dull, and you have to come up as the summariser and explain what happened, you know." And he said, "Look, old boy," he said, "it's my job to keep the public from switching that knob to off." And I thought, well, that's not a bad lesson.
Wasn't the first point, was it? Right. So it was, instead of Come in Barry, it was Come in Harry once or twice.
It was for a bit, yes.
Yeah.
Desmond, incidentally, Raymond did introduce that first sports report.
He did indeed, yes. It's a point that we overlooked there for a moment. His name is down here. Edited by Angus Mackay, introduced by Raymond Glendenning, indeed. Funnily enough, looking at that page of the Radio Times and looking just 2 programmes above it, that's after the Association Football, after you came off, John, there was a pantomime, an excerpt from Derek Roy's Cinderella. Commentator, Brian Johnston.
All the countdown. They were big time. They came from the Regal Edmonton. Jean Kent was the principal there. She had the best pair of thighs I've ever slapped. I mean, I didn't slap them. She slapped them. She's very good. And Bobby Kimber, who was that present day Danny LaRue, and I've never yet discovered whether he or she was a he or she or she or a he. Oh, no. Very good, Bobby Kimber. And that was a very good time. So I was a bit versatile in those days.
Certainly you were. You used to do all sorts of things. You hadn't really gone, I suppose, sort of legit then, had you?
Legit. No, I used to come in and do odd things I used to read the Rugger once. I remember I pronounced that well-known place from Lanelli. I suddenly came on it, and that didn't go very well. And I used to interview cricketers and stuff. But I really came into it a bit later on because John and Rex went on tours. John, we went in 1948 to South Africa, didn't you? And Rex went to the West Indies and then South Africa after. And then it became a regular thing, partly because my salesmanship. I used to go up and see Angus, this marvellous office of his with no desk, no papers, nothing, but a coffee table with a cup of coffee. How he got through all his bump work, I don't know. And I used to try and sell him cricket because I had slight suspicion he was rather keen on soccer. And I used to tell him what a wonderful game. And I must say, once I went on the tours, and I used to then go regularly, he was marvellous support. And I heard David Coleman say on the way in that he used to ring up in the middle of the night because he didn't know the time. I can assure you he did know the time, but he just wanted to talk to you there and then. He didn't mind if it was 3 o'clock in the morning.
The very first sports report I did with Angus, which was about 6 or 7 years ago now, you know this marvellous earpiece that he talks to you through. Yeah. The first thing he ever said to me on it, I said pardon back to him through the glass, and he wasn't too amused about that. I think my career nearly ended.
Because he used to sit next to Eamon, didn't he? Marvellous whispers into his ear.
I think Eamonn's professionalism in Angus's panic days was quite startling. I've known him get 5 different instructions blasted at him within half a minute. And all the time he's going on talking about a harmless looking chap on the other side of the table.
Yeah. They're panicking outside there now, actually, because they want me to go on to the cricket, actually. So I've got to interrupt you just for a moment. Stop! You've been associated with the programme for a long time. Any outstanding memories?
Well, I first enjoyed broadcasting, quite frankly, when I saw, if John Bond is listening, his great West Ham team. I fell in love with the team. At Bolton one day, they came out, they looked like things from outer space. They were glistening in the afternoon sun. They'd been oiled up and they played some magical football. I fell in love with West Ham, John Bond and Co, and especially Ronnie Greenwood, and I'm darn glad he's got the England job.
And I was going to say, you've been with us ever since.
Yes. Yes, I've got a little memory as well with our broadcasts like Burton everywhere. The Blue Room at Anthony Stanley was one place. It was incredible. I remember there was a cup tie against Preston and we used to sit on the basket. And a little gnarled old man, they used to be full of gnarled old men, Lancashire. It's all changed now, of course. He came to me in the middle of the broadcast.
Now, young men, now.
Yes. Speak for yourself, love. And he says to me in the middle of broadcast, he says, "He Stanley played well this afternoon, didn't they? I'm talking to you, or Raymond Andrews, or whoever's in there." And I'm trying to carry on this conversation. He said, "He played well. I'm looking forward to when Stanley captain gets cut from King." And I said in the middle of the broadcast, "Hey, we've got a queen on the throne." He says, "Aye, that's what I'm telling you about. When there's a king on the throne, Stanley will win quick."
That was in the middle of your report, was it?
In the middle of the report, yeah.
Oh dear, oh dear. Well, I hope you're not interrupted today as you bring us news of Leeds and Manchester City. Stuart, thank you.
Thank you, Dad.
In the 50s and 60s, and that's Eamonn Andrews joining us now from Dublin. Good afternoon, Eamonn.
Good afternoon, Desmond. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Welcome to the programme this afternoon. What are you doing in Dublin at the moment?
Well, what I've been doing since 1:30 is doing a sort of a wash in sportstalgia since you gave us out of the blue there, and I've been listening, and Bill Bockwell and his broom cupboard, and old guru Geoffrey Green there, who defies levitation and gravity, and thinking back over all those years. But let me make it clear, I haven't been there over 30 years, you know. I'm younger than Angus Mackay.
He's not here yet, actually, but we're expecting him shortly. I'm sure the programme has many outstanding memories for you there, Eamonn.
Oh, it's lots of memories. You know, to try and recount them is almost impossible. I was just thinking, listening to you, and this, everything gets better as time goes on, of course, and all you fellas are much better than all our fellas were, and so on. But
I'm not quite sure about that.
But the key point that has changed, really, just occurred to me, is how you spoiled the sports fans now. That there you are, feeding them from 1:30, whereas the old sports report was that they had to go out and watch sport and then come back and get the encapsulated version.
Yes, they can do it all in the armchair these days.
Yes.
Going back a few years, I think you were the first one to take sports report abroad, were you not, Eamonn?
I think that was the time we went to Miami, yes. When Cassius Clay Muhammad, I can't remember when he changed his name. I think he was still Cassius.
I think he was.
Was boxing Liston.
Sonny Liston, was it?
That's right. And the Saturday before that, Angus decided to try and do it too. And I don't know how it happened, but it certainly happened in a tiny little station there with Harry Carpenter and myself and Frank Butler and a couple of lines and telephones. And we started giving the scores, the London scores from Miami, which was people are a bit blasé now, I suppose, but it was a kind of magic to us. It all kept coming in one ear and going out one mouth.
Well, Harry Carpenter's here with us this afternoon, as you're obviously aware, and I'm sure you remember that day as well, do you, Harry?
Yes, hello, Eamonn.
Hello, Harry.
I remember that very well, and the way the football scores got on the air was that I sat there with my headphones on, listening to Angus pumping them down, and I scribbled on a piece of paper, and you miraculously read them. I don't know how you read my writing, but you did.
Oh, well, there were more miracles than one.
A few minutes, let's relax from the afternoon's football and talk perhaps for a moment or two about the quality and the business of reporting sport. Cliff Morgan, if I can ask you first, what do you think are the main ingredients, the main qualities in a good reporter of sport, perhaps in radio terms first?
Actually, I think Angus Mackay sent out a piece of paper once, which is indelibly placed in my mind, and he said that it didn't matter tuppence if a goal was scored, for instance, in 26 minutes. It mattered a lot if it was in the first minute or the last. It won a game. And every game has a turning point, and every game has a star. And that you put into words the sort of impressions, giving the information that was necessary, but also to give it your touch, something that you had observed and seen. And the main thing is to be honest, and that's what the boss used to tell us. And it was very demanding on someone who was young, but he was very tough and ruthless about it, I must say. That it was a great lesson to sit down after the program and listen to the tape with him and be torn to bits. And I think this is a thing which a lot of people know in life generally, slightly resent, and that's someone giving him a rocket for doing something badly. And if you really think to yourself, well, if that man wasn't concerned about me being better, he wouldn't bother to tell me. And to take the criticism in that sort of way is, I think, a lesson that every reporter should learn really quickly.
I'd say this about Angus, is he didn't pick me. I think he's a jolly good picker. He made a very good selector, I think, of an England cricket side or any side. He picked some very good broadcasters. And then he did, as you say, give them the rockets, just as Lobby did us, and, with Harry...
Talking about names that I should think that the public might not be aware of.
He was Villabinier, who was the sort of Brian of teaching of the commentators. He was the head of outside broadcast, and after every broadcast one made on the first joint, we used to ring him up and said, "How did I do, boss?" And he said, "Not bad," and then for the next half hour, I told you what you've done wrong. And one didn't resent it, one liked it. But Angus is the same. He used to give one, if you've done a rotten cricket report, he said so.
Let me just hark back to Cliff for a moment. I think you get the idea, and you get the first sentence, and you go, and you've got to feel it and look at the stopwatch, and hope the last sentence comes. But really, in tune with Cliff is this telephone call we just had. Congratulations. Fondest memories to Angus and all his brood, from Sheila Glendenning.
How very kind of him.
And if you ask for the memory, it's got to be the one occasion when a test match fused, one of the two occasions, when a test match fused down to the end, runs, wickets, time, and when the last over began, all results were possible. And in Durban in 1949, Cliff Gladwin won the test match off the last ball with a leg by off his thigh, the wicketkeeper standing back, short leg blinded by rain, and Alec Bencher halfway down the pitch before the ball reached the batsman. It was a pretty hectic time, and breath choked in your throat, because cricket doesn't often throw up its perfection of a result.
John, thank you very much indeed, and thank you, gentlemen, for reminiscing with us and celebrating with us our 30 years of sports report, and thank you very much, Eamonn Andrews, over there in Dublin.
Desmond, have you got 1 second?
I have.
It must obviously be good luck for sport for the next bit, but I had to beat off my children in the last few minutes. A cat of ours that's been missing for a fortnight has turned up under jubilation, so it must be a good sign for something.
Shalom to Eamonn.
Bye-bye, Eamonn. Thank you very much.
Good news.
Good luck to all.
Good luck.
Thanks. And you can wish us happy birthday if you like, because we're celebrating our 30th birthday today on Sports Report. If you're just joining us, this is Desmond Lynam welcoming you to Sports Report, celebrating its 30th birthday today with a cup tie edition. And the FA Cup news. The holders Manchester United are held at Carlisle as Brian Greenoff is sent off. Last year's beaten finalists Liverpool are out. Everton go through. Manchester City win at Leeds, but the match is interrupted by crowd trouble. Arsenal score 5 to go through. Third Division Wrexham share 8 goals with Bristol City. Hartlepool knock out Crystal Palace. Blythe Spartans reach the 4th round, but are the only non-league team to go through.
I've been thinking that the inherent danger of nostalgia and retrospection, and of celebrating a birthday like this, is the all too easy assumption that a program like Sports Report in the late 40s was the beginning and the end of radio journalism. Mind you, it was just that in many ways. Radio brought urgency and immediacy to the reporting of sport. The excitement, the frustrations, the inspiration, the vanities, the resentments, the satisfactions. It even pleased the Secretary of the Football League, Alan Hardacre. Not easy to please, but inevitably totally honest.
This program, I think, is listened to by everybody. Even I used to listen to it before I joined the league, anyway. And I think the Sports Report have been an example to all the people who do interviews with players. It's the right way to do it.
So too that marvellously genuine cricket man, former Secretary of the MCC, Billy Griffith.
I am a tremendous fan of this program, and I feel like many others that has contributed tremendously to the welfare of sport generally, and cricket in particular.
And how cricket, in fact, everything has changed in 30 years. In 1948, you could buy a house in the heart of London for £6,500. A bottle of Scotch set you back 31 shillings, and Dockers in Portsmouth went on strike because tea in the canteen went up by twopence. Some things, though, do endure. Men like John Mercer, who, it seems to me, is always as rich and colourful as a good autumn. Here on Sports Report, talking about Arsenal players of his day.
Oh, that side, well, we'd adapt, of course. We'd have to change with the times, and you've got to play in a modern way. But all these players would get a kick. Jim Logie, for instance, great player. Tom Roper would still score goals. Reggie Lewis, great technique. Big Les Compton gets everything upstairs, like Jackie Charlton. Bloody Scots like lightning. Wally Barnes, the best kicker of a ball I've ever seen with 2 feet. Used to kick it from left back to outside right. It's taken me about 3 kicks to get it there, he used to say.
Well, them were the days. Or were they? Well, the sportsmen of the 1970s and 80s will be faster and fitter. They'll have to devote so much time to their training. They'll be under scrutiny of television cameras. Their lot is not easy. For certain, the performances are better all round now. But I wonder if excessive patriotism and political and commercial exploitation could ruin it all eventually. I hope not. You see, despite the fact that success and winning is important, sport still has to have a sense of values and a sense of fun. I mean, how else could an ace cricket commentator make a living?
Well, I've had so much fun at cricket. Funnily enough, Jim Swanton's name often associated with it. For instance, once he was doing a commentary at Headingley. A man walked by with a ladder and a lavatory seat round his neck. He disappeared on the football stand, came back with the ladder minus the lavatory seat, and Jim Swanton didn't even mention it. The other occasion when the chimney at Lord's caught fire, black smoke belched out at the same time as they were electing the Pope in St. Peter's Square when they were waiting for the white puff of smoke there. And I was able to say, well, there you are, Jim Swanton's being elected Pope. Another occasion when he said, well, there we are, the end of the day, it's been a very good day, and the final score, and he looked up and they'd switched off the electric scoreboard. Cricket is fun, even when I made the mistake of saying a chap was sitting on a shooting stick and got it the wrong way round, collapse of everybody in the box.
There we are, we're celebrating 30 years of Sports Report. Here's to the next 30 years, and we leave the final word tonight on this 30th anniversary Sports Report to a man who presented the very first show all that time ago, I've nearly lost my voice, in 1948, Raymond Glendenning. Raymond, even after his retirement, always had a special feeling for the 5 o'clock show.
Many a time after a match I'd been broadcasting was away from home, the moment I got into the car, I switched on the radio, and there was the old familiar da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-dum-da-dee, da-da-da-dum-da-dee. Oh, yes.
And
that special anniversary edition of Sport on 2, Son of Sports Report, was introduced by